Hello, everybody. Welcome to this regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, June 17th. Holland Squallen, Clis Tuktumut, La Squamish Ochmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that the council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting, which this evening is our Deputy Corporate Officer, Sarah Morris. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Motion carries. And I just wanted to point out to the folks in the room that we have Councillor Pettingill is participating remotely this evening, so he'll be only appearing on the screens. So next up, we have no delegations under item 3. Item 4 is unscheduled public attendance. This is where if someone has a matter that's urgent or emergent in nature, needs to be addressed before our next meeting, they could bring that forward now. Not seeing any, we'll move along. We do not have any public hearings this evening. We have the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Or if not, could I get a mover for the consent agenda? Councillor Stoner moves.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to pull.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
My raise hand button has become broken again.
Okay, we'll get that fixed for you. But what would you like to pull?
6DI, the CCAP update.
Okay. Sounds good. Is there anything else? Nope. So Councillor Stoner moved, Councillor French seconds. So again, this is the consent agenda. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on to, we'll revisit the item that was pulled at the appropriate point in the agenda later on this evening. So for now, we're going to go on to 7, which is bylaws. So 7A1, which is the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011 amendment bylaw. This is for a comprehensive development zone 118 for 38140 3rd Avenue. And I hoped citing the whole title would give staff some time to get to get set up, but we'll get them set up for the presentation, and then we'll turn it over to them.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Carrie Hamilton, planner for the District of Squamish, and I'll be presenting to you today the amendment bylaw 3093-2024 for first, second, and third reading for rezoning file 47, CD 118, located on 38140 3rd Avenue. Let's make sure it's moving forward. All right, so the application proposes to rezone an existing residential 1, so it's an R1 zone lot, to a comprehensive development zone 118, so CD 118 for short, which would permit 45 residential units and 525 meters squared of ground floor commercial space. The project advances 2 strategic plan objectives under connected and livable community, as it enhances active transportation infrastructure and diversity of unit types in the downtown area. It also advances prepared for the future by creating a net increase of employment lands. The project also advances the district's 2025 housing targets by a 6.5% for the 2023 housing needs, 14.2% for provincial needs, and 6.25% for CMHC commitment. So 38140 3rd Avenue is located at the southeast corner of Pemberton and 3rd Avenue and is designated the downtown commercial center in the OCP. The property is adjacent to lands designated downtown residential and downtown gateway and is across from a recent development project, which is CD 91 and approved for 38201 3rd Avenue. The project brief, which is found in attachment 2, indicates that a single detached home on the site had fallen in disrepair and had been vacant for nearly a decade. The site was deconstructed in 2024 following safe hazardous material practices and achieved an 82% diversion rate, with 3 metric tons of wood donated to Squamish Rebuild for reuse and floorboards from the original house, salvaged for potential incorporation into the building feature or a public art piece on site. So the development fronts 2 collector streets intended for protected bicycle lanes in both the OCP and active transportation plan. As you can see from the image on the right, the site has an irregular shape and grading due to the elevated and angled alignment of Pemberton Avenue, resulting in a recommended CD 118 zone instead of a standard downtown commercial C4 zone. The project is still similar to the C4 zone, with a few exceptions due to the irregular lot size and grading. The exceptions include increased height from 20 meters to 21.5 meters, which has to do with the grade changes on the site, 20% commercial gross floor area, or GFA, to 15%, and commercial GFA is due to the irregular shape of the site, increased floor area ratio, which is FAR, from 3 to 3.33. And this is as a result of the site dedicating the land fronting Pemberton and 3rd Avenue as road dedication to the district instead of through a statutory right-of-way. And should the project not have dedicated that land, it would meet the 3.0 FAR, which is in our OCP land use.
Sorry, just a question on this table while you have it here, and we're talking this concept. Is it a similar concept for the commercial ratio? The percentage available, like if this was able to build to if that dedication wasn't there, that 15% number would be somewhere, but like how close to 20 would we get, or do you know?
For what purpose, sorry?
Just in a similar way we're calculating the FAR, if the ground floor, if there wasn't a need to dedicate those portions of the site, was that 20% more obtainable in that scenario? Like, is that a factor in that reduction as well? I guess maybe that's the question.
I wouldn't know the calculation. I don't have the calculation on hand to confirm that, sorry. So the other changes are a rear setback reduction from 1 meter to 0 meters for the park gate only. And this is to support more parking within, again, this irregular lot shape. And there was no concern for any fire access with this change. Additional parking provisions to explicitly support residential and commercial shared parking use for 4 stalls and to secure the cash in lieu for commercial parking stalls. There's existing zoning regulation that already supports this approach. However, it's just explicitly called out in this particular zone. And this option is intended to be secured at development permit stage. So there's existing off-street infrastructure is anticipated to be needing upgrading to support the increased density on the site. I'm just going to walk you through some of this complicated civil design. So the primary vehicle access will be from the laneway, requiring the complete laneway to be repaved with a new letdown and stormwater infrastructure for drainage. The development is proposing to build active transportation infrastructure along their frontage, which includes intersection upgrades to the southeast corner of Pemberton. And it also could include the 3rd Avenue upgrades to the northeast corner. And that is if a stormwater infrastructure upgrades are required along Pemberton. There's a lot of detail about stormwater infrastructure upgrades within the report. But in short, the stormwater infrastructure upgrades are anticipated for the site and may or may not include Pemberton Avenue. Stormwater infrastructure upgrades along Pemberton Avenue are a future DCC project, and if required, would be upgraded by the development, and the district would compensate with applicable drainage DCC credits, and is proposing $100,000 of the CAC general amenity to fund and contribute the curb bulge upgrade, which is highlighted on the screen there. So the last piece is the unique dead-end laneway includes a fenced and grade change from the lane to the Pemberton Avenue. And as part of the site redevelopment, a staircase with a bicycle push ramp feature is proposed to support a pedestrian and cycling connectivity from the laneway to Pemberton. Several off-site upgrades are unique to the conditions of the site and will be secured through a land development agreement, or LDA for short. So the applicant is proposing to provide a community amenity contribution, CAC, in alignment with our CAC policy for developments with less than 50 dwelling units, which requires no affordable housing targets. So the total financial contribution is worth just over $700,000, and two amenities exceed the CAC targets. One is a public art contribution to be located on the public property, and the second is a financial contribution to Moto Car Share Cooperative to secure car share memberships for each residential unit, reducing the financial barriers to using car share services downtown. Cash in lieu payment is proposed prior to the development permit issuance with the consumer price index, which is in keeping with the policy. Renegotiation of CAC will be secured if the development has not commenced within 5 years. So again, the LDA is required to be secured for this project prior to rezoning adoption to secure the CAC and these additional amenities and upgrades proposed with this development that are not already secured through other regulations. So the report provides more detail than this table that's summarized on the screen today, but for this evening's context, the slide briefly highlights what the elements that have not been discussed at today's presentation, which includes securing the green roof design and installation of a kitchen ventilation to support possible restaurant use, and includes additional off-site LDA commitments, which include the possibility of modeling that might be required, laneway retaining wall upgrades, and review of an electrical pole and underground alignment, all of which would be reviewed at a servicing agreement. So to engage the community per the policy, the project was posted to the District of Squamish Development Review website, and a development sign has been posted on the site. One comment was received outlining some parking concerns for the project. Ministry of Transportation and Transit approval is required for this rezoning, and the ministry has provided written comment that they have no concerns with the project and will issue approval following third reading. In accordance with the new provincial housing legislation, local governments are now prohibited from holding public hearings related to rezoning applications for developments that are primarily residential and are consistent with the OCP. This proposal meets that criteria. So notification has been sent in accordance with the new act and prior to consideration. So staff's recommendation is that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw CD 118 for 38140 3rd Avenue be given first, second, and third reading. Prior to adoption, the following items are to be resolved, which is the road land dedication for the active transportation land and registration of a no gas covenant, registration of a flood covenant, and registration of a land development agreement to secure the items that are listed in the report. Alternatively, District of Squamish zoning bylaw CD 118 could be given first reading, and that council would direct staff to make the following amendments before consideration of second reading. Or alternatively, they could send the bylaw back and refer back to staff for further review. Implications of this alternative recommendation is that delays may affect the viability of the project given current uncertain market conditions. That concludes the presentation for this afternoon or this evening, and welcome any council's feedback.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. So the elevator details caught my eye, and it's mostly because there's more elevator information in this development plan and the architectural drawings than I'm used to seeing. We learn that the elevator details include a clear cab dimension of 4 foot 3 inches by 6 foot 8 inches. Doesn't give it in metric, but that's okay. And the RO dimensions are 6 foot 6 by 8 by 8, or 8 foot 8 inches. I tried to figure out what RO stands for and couldn't find that. It's probably insignificant, but if anybody knows, I'd love to have that mystery solved. My main question, though, is this elevator configuration similar to and consistent with the buildings we've recently seen completed downtown, like Milagro, AGN, the Lauren, Amaji, Ashlew, the Wilford, Sea to Sky, Sea and Sky apartments?
So through the mayor, the drawings for this evening are rezoning context only. We at rezoning, we do not look at the interior of the building. This would be done at building code for the interior of the building, and the elevator would be required to comply to the BC building code at the time of their application.
Okay, got it. Then I'll scratch my second question related to the elevator. We've got more than 500 square meters of commercial space in this proposal, and the zoning bylaw indicates properties of this size need to have an on-street loading zone within 45 meters. And the development details indicate the plan is to explore opportunities to share loading facilities with neighboring commercial properties. Now, at first, this jumped out at me as a concern because I'm nervous we could have a repeat of what we have experienced at Jumar, where there's no loading zone, and that proved to be quite problematic for students at the elementary school, for parents and administrators within the school district, and also for delivery drivers going to Jumar. So I'm wondering, with that loading zone situation being a little nefarious and a little out there at this point, is there an avenue down the road to make sure that there is a loading zone within 45 meters? And I'm thinking specifically of the land development agreement stage or the development permit. At what point can we lock down a loading zone?
Certainly. So through the mayor, the point in which we would review those details would be at the servicing agreement. And this is where we look at all the off-site infrastructure, and engineering is aware of that regulation and would be looking for an appropriate loading-based location at that time. And just to further speak to the Jumar project, which was brought up, there is a loading zone on that site, and that there was a challenge with that loading zone with GFL, particularly around height compliances, but it does meet our regulation and there is a loading zone.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarification on Jumar.
Thank you for that. I'll go to Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, a few questions. Can you just clarify the rear setback is requested to be varied from 1 meter to 0 meters for the parking. So is that just the second story? And if so, do we know what the rear setback is for the upper stories? And I guess the first story too?
So through the mayor, the C4 zone or our active transportation regulations in our zoning bylaw allow for a 2.5 meter setback in the frontage, which then allows for a 1 meter setback at the rear of the site. And so they are currently trying, the CD zone essentially varies that regulation in order to support 0 meters just for the second story of that parkade, just so that it can extend and meet the full widths of those parking stalls.
Okay, so it'll still be that 1 meter setback for the other stories.
Correct.
Thank you. And then just to clarify the public art piece, your presentation mentioned that it'd be on public property, but the schematics that I was looking at looked like it would actually be on the outside of the building, which my guess would be private. So can we clarify if that's public, would be public property or not?
So through the mayor, the schematic is just intended to show what they might consider at a development permit for public art to meet the development permit guidelines, but it is not intended to be the public art contribution. This is clearly stated as an additional public art contribution that would be located on the public property within the vicinity of the property, but are within the vicinity of that property, but on public land.
Thank you for that clarification. And then can you just clarify, with the proposed land dedications, the sidewalk, does that end up on district property if it's dedicated, or is that within the private property?
So through the mayor, the the land is currently on private property and it will become district property through the land dedication.
Thank you for that clarification. I have two more. Should I keep going? The stormwater upgrades, as presented, it says that the proponent becomes solely responsible for the upgrades if needed to move this project forward, and we would provide credits for the drainage DCCs. It feels like the cost of doing the full upgrade would be substantially greater than just the expected DCC contribution. So can staff speak to how we square that? Do we just assume that the developer will pay the full amount because they want to move the project, this particular project forward? And so they carry the burden of that full DCC project?
Yeah, through the mayor, this project has worked extensively with our engineering department to kind of review those storm conditions, but we don't know what those storm outputs are until we start doing those detailed calculations. So at this time, we're just trying to provide some language in the LDA that would allow for these opportunities should they arise, and duly noted that the DCC credit amount would not cover the full extent of those costs, and that at this time, what the LDA would state is that the developer would have to pay for those additional costs required to updating the storm on Pemberton, particularly.
Okay, I'll mull on that a little bit. My other last question was around the sunset clause, which I very much appreciate including here, as it's something that I pushed for in previous conversations. I am curious though, given the complexity of this site in particular, and the stormwater component, what our average turnaround time is for servicing agreements for projects like this. And so I want to make sure that we are actually setting everybody up for success. If our turnaround time on our side is multiple years for servicing agreements, then I just want to do a gut check that this is reasonable.
Through the mayor, I can't speak to the engineering service agreement times. However, there's been some substantial work done with the civil design, concept design that we've seen today. And we don't foresee any kind of unexpected challenges with this one, which typically would delay those servicing agreements. So we can't at this time for sure commit to know that this will, not within the 5 years time, but we could put some language in the LDA to say that it's, acting reasonably from the district side of things to account for that 5-year timeline, if that's a concern.
And I'd add through that, through the mayor, that servicing agreement times have greatly improved over the years as we've increased capacity within the engineering department. Execution of the LDA would rely on the deliverable of certain services within those 5 years. So theoretically, they could have paid all of their CACs and the things that trigger the agreement, in which case, even if they haven't made it to construction, it would still be a valid land development agreement. It's when they don't go for a development permit over years that it would then expire or cause renegotiation of the deliverables.
I've got Councillor Pettingill next.
Yeah, two topics. One, just wanting to understand the MODO contribution and what we mean by membership costs, how that gets distributed. When I look at their pricing, like the one option is a one-time share purchase of $500 per, which would be, I think, 50 of those, that would be your $25,000, and then that's all refundable when you decide to leave. And so someone could get that all back and no longer have that. Or so I'm just wanting to understand, like, what is the duration? How is this meant to be split up? Or what's our expectation with this?
Yeah, through the mayor, the MODO has individual agreements, and they also do kind of group agreements. And so the intention is that this is an agreement that will live with the building, with the unit owner or tenant. And so if a unit owner or tenant were to relocate, then they wouldn't have that membership anymore, and that membership benefit and the membership benefit would pass on to the next unit tenant or owner.
But for clarity, when I think about the number of units and see some of the prices, this is maybe 1 year at best, or maybe I misunderstand. Like, what's our expectation about how long this lasts? Or this is sort of a basic membership, but all your hourly rates and all of that is on top of it, and that's unit holders are expected to cover that.
Yeah, through the mayor, correct. So this is the one-time payment is paid for by living in these units, and that you would just have to then pay for your times as you use the Moto car share. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I guess then our related question is, I understand there's not a lot of players in the market. In other cases, I think we've asked for dedicated spots without being agnostic to a particular provider. Is there a way or a reason or like why we went with Moto specifically, and why we would make this more generic to sort of anyone in the space that was appropriate at the time this is ready to go forward?
So through the mayor, in discussions with the current car share provider, which we have in the district, which is Moto, there is a limit to how they don't want to see small car stalls in smaller developments. And there is a limit to how they want to increase the amount of car shares that we have in our community. And so this is seen as instead of providing a car, an incentive tool that is used for kind of these smaller developments. And it's an agreement between the Moto car share user and that strata, and it would live with that strata and be covenant on title with that, with those details. And it would be structured through not your typical kind of agreement of $500 per person. They usually have little benefit packages as a larger package for the strata.
Okay, I'll ponder that for a bit. Just shifting gears, I guess this is, in my mind, another development where we're being asked to reduce the employment, which seems we don't usually get asked to increase the employment. We've done some various studies about general employment needs, and in my mind, matching housing to employment, so on and so forth. Are we keeping track anywhere of the sort of running sum total of employment space reductions we are approving?
I think we're going to get a comment from Mr. Vilniskis here.
Thank you. Jonas Vilniskis, Senior Director of Community Development. Just wanted to add that my understanding is that we're not reducing employment space here. It's different than what C4 zone would require, but this is not zoned C4. And we've created those standards a few years ago. But what we've learned so far is that downtown with small lot developments, it's very challenging, especially in these market conditions, to fill the kind of standard C4 requirements for employment space. So it's trade-offs. We're having quite a bit of new employment space that has been recently delivered in Squamish, and so we're waiting for that space to fill out. So I think it's going to be a bit of stop and go process as Squamish grows in terms of filling this new employment space. So we've got to have some flexibility here and there to accommodate market conditions.
If I may, I just add, I know that the Pemberton Avenue angled alignment has made for kind of a decrease in what you would typically see in a rectangular lot size, and that reduction has accounted to the reduced commercial percentages that this particular project can achieve on a corner lot.
So just if I could just on this, I think the question was keeping track of the reductions over time, but I think that what we're trying to get at there, what I would want to get at there is how are we tracking those ongoing needs? When would we see an update to those, that employment space needs category compared to what's existing at the time of that assessment, which I think is kind of the same thing that we're talking about here from just the other half of the equation. Can you speak to that?
Certainly. Yes, the employment space needs is something that we continuously evaluate. It's we've just you will be aware that we've just finished building the Squamish Insight model, which looks mostly into housing. And part of the plan in the future was to resource that model, addition to that model, to include employment space, but we're not there yet in terms of resourcing that analysis.
Okay, thank you. I think that would achieve a similar thing to what we were getting at there with Councillor Pettingill's line of questioning, but I'll go back to you, Councillor Pettingill. You have another question?
Yeah, so a couple follow-ups. So I understand the size or the shape of the lot may make commercial and sort of is used as a justification for reducing the commercial, but there hasn't been a corresponding reduction in the residential, or has the residential been reduced by a comparable amount as well?
Through the mayor, yes, it's always a bit of a triangle, like I like to see it: parking, residential, commercial. And there are limits to how much we can put on a site, and it's a balance. So in this case, it was felt that the balance was appropriate for those three all those three components to meet, and to push as much housing density as possible to meet those housing targets.
Okay, and I just want to make sure I understood Mr. Valniskis. I think I heard that it's challenging for developers to sell commercial right now. But unless I'm misunderstanding, that's distinct from whether or not we have sort of matching employment to housing, or we are meeting sort of building a community where employment matches housing. Like those two, we're not assuming at this point that we have a reduced need for employment generally, just that developers don't find it as easy to sell that at this moment. Is that an accurate sort of assessment?
Through the mayor, it's more about the location and the size of the lot. So there's, we do look at feasibility, and we know that with smaller lots, smaller apartment buildings with less units, those are the most challenged type of developments when it comes to feasibility. So we have to take into account all the challenges that are layering on. Downtown, the downtown core is an area identified in our OCP for population growth. So we're balancing that need to land some density downtown with as much employment space as possible.
So if I just to follow up one last point, and sorry, I'm pushing on this a little bit, but if we are sort of looking at a lot like this and saying, okay, in this particular case, it makes sense, and I understand the insights work is possibly coming, but in the interim, when we've made some of those concessions on recent rezonings, are we considering those in some of the other rezonings and say, oh, hey, this one, we actually better ask for 25 or 30% commercial because we accepted some reductions for various good reasons on a few other units downtown? Like, are we sort of trying to, as we go, match these things?
Through the chair, we're not looking at it from that granular of a level of in terms of what we, potentially are losing in employment space to try and make it up somewhere else. I think that's more of a official community plan level conversation that we will have the next time we're updating our official community plan. We'll have to take stock of the population growth that we've seen, the population growth that we're likely to see, and make sure that there is employment space to account for it as well. And mixed use employments are maybe not ideal for ensuring that there's enough employment space. I think we have to look at primary employment areas for future employment growth.
Okay, I will leave that there for now. Thanks.
Go ahead.
If I just may just have another way to look at it, the way in which we regulate the commercial space is it's a percentage of the total GFA of the building. And so essentially, in this case, we could reduce a residential unit and you would comply to the 20%, but you wouldn't get any more additional commercial space out of that deal.
Okay, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is tangentially related. I'm wondering if somebody can remind me where we got to with the update of the C4 zone. Because didn't we start a process of reviewing it at the end of last term? because we had so many challenges with it. And we were like, we should probably review this and see if we can come up with something a bit better because it's not really working for anyone. And I'm just wondering if I'm totally making that up or if we.
Through the mayor, that was referred to within our work plan. However, given the work that came on board with the Bill 44 and the Squamish Housing Action Plan through the Housing Accelerator Fund, it's fallen off of our work plan given the resources needed to properly address C4.
Thank you for that. So council, we do have a recommendation before us, and also opportunity to add some commentary. So I'll be looking to see if anyone's ready to. I feel like this is where we are. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Is that your hand, Councillor? Staff recommendation, seconded by Councillor Stoner, and this is for first, second, and third reading for clarity. Go ahead, Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. First, I want to acknowledge the effective deconstruction of the home that was removed from the site. 82% of that home was recycled or will be used for something else, reused in some way. And floorboards from the home have been set aside for possible use in a future public art piece. Developers, take note. This is the bar. This is the new standard. And it's high. So some of this material has gone to the Squamish Rebuild. We're going to see it redistributed around the community as folks who purchase from Squamish Rebuild repurpose and reuse those materials. Second, I want to point out that in approving this development proposal, we're doing something unique in accepting a financial contribution to a vehicle share program so that each unit in the building is going to have a membership and a car share. So we heard those details tonight. This is, in my opinion, a very creative way to help deal with the push and pull between the need for vehicle use and the challenges that are related to the inclusion of parking spots in small development sites like the one that we've got here. And third, I want to point out that the public art component exceeds our community amenity contribution minimums. And this is as I understand it, due to the developer's enthusiasm for public art. This marries quite well with the new bike share program that we've just seen introduced in our community. So the bike share, the car share, all coming together to ease the parking situation, not just for this specific property, but downtown generally. Another factor influencing my support for this project is the time lapse that we'll experience between now and when people start moving into this building. We've got an opportunity during the construction phase to further improve the transit system, in my mind, mainly in the downtown area. And I'm anticipating that by the time we've got people moving into that building, we will have a Sea to Sky regional transit system. My confidence in that statement was bolstered earlier today when we heard from our MLA, who confirmed for us that he's very diligently working with his counterparts in Victoria to get us regional transit that will serve West Vancouver to Pemberton.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I too will be supporting the motion on the floor for many of the same reasons that my council colleague just enumerated, so I won't double down on all of them. I do think some of the variations that we're seeing from what would typically be the C4 are reasonable and well justified, especially for this challenging corner lot with a unique variance on its grading that we don't typically see downtown. But some of the components, the increase in the floor area ratio from 3.0 to 3.33, I think is very justifiable given the land dedication. A key portion of this being a corner lot on two key active transportation corridors is really, really critical. We know how difficult it is to develop active transportation corridors throughout our community, but especially downtown. And so giving a little bit of give and take here in order to get those big buffers so that we can get the separated bike paths, some nice sidewalks and some treed areas. We just had the downtown tree canopy study come to us not too long ago and reiterate the importance of the downtown tree canopy. And I think some of that is reiterated here in this proposal. Similar to my council colleague highlighting the Moto membership proposal, not that this is specific to that company, but it is the company that we do have in town, and we have heard that it is going to be more successful if more people sign up, not necessarily that they'll bring more cars if there are more members. And so it's like this chicken and egg. If it was a different company, I'd be supporting it as well. What it is actually just making sure that this becomes a viable option for our community going forward. And that means that more people need to be aware of it, more people need to sign up, and more people need to start using it. And this, I think, is a really creative example of trying to achieve that while supporting a slightly lower parking number, or at least some more shared parking for the commercial and the visitor components. The general concept behind this, I think, also achieves a lot of our goals in terms of connected and livable spaces in a positive public realm. And so I'm happy to support the motion on the floor as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, then Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. Bit unsure about how I want to go with this one. In general, I like what I see here and some of the trade-offs. I am struggling with the employment reduction, and a reason I may vote against would be to draw a fine point on this. I think it actually is important for me that we are, as much as possible, designing employment nearby housing so that people don't need to get into a vehicle to go to their work. I am open to all sorts of different employment solutions, and if there's a compelling explanation of, hey, we can reduce some immediate employment right here because this other employment thing is happening that's evolved, some of that sort of discussion could help me sort of understand this. It doesn't make sense to me that sort of on a one-off rezoning basis we can reduce some of the employment ratios we've asked for in our policy, but if we want to increase to sort of match that and balance it out, it doesn't make sense to me that we have to wait for an OCP review or a large study to do that. So I think we need to find a way to make sure these things are balanced, and maybe that'll require some council prioritization of some things. I think, you know, we have very, very aggressive mode shift ambitions, and that requires that employment is abundant and close. I understand that the market is tough for developers to meet these requirements when they've paid the inflated land prices. And so maybe we need to hold tough on some of these and push the land prices down, because if you're not paying as much for land, it's easier to make the employment space, I think, doable. So that's where I have some hesitation and concern here. And so that's my dilemma at the moment. But again, overall, the rest of this makes sense to me, and there's some good trade-offs. But I really, at this moment, bristle at the idea of reducing employment to housing ratios.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Process that has already been taking place on the site a little while back. The efforts working with staff to cope with or adapt to the irregular lot shape. There's a number of elements there that I think are noteworthy. The reference to the installation of kitchen ventilation mechanical design to support the possibility of at least one restaurant use on the site. I'm quoting from the LDA summary. I think that's also a thoughtful element looking ahead to maximizing the opportunity for potential commercial space and recognizing the challenges in that. And finally, I'll refer to the public art element, which has already been referred to. This is also something that is a first, in that there will be collaboration with and working under the guidelines of our district public art advisor. This is not mandatory. And it's the first time we have a private developer coming forward to volunteer to work under that process. And this will be a benefit to fostering the public art programming in Squamish. It means that the Squamish arts can get, we can all get better at tendering, for example. And with respect again to public art, we often think of it vertical spaces or 3D sculpture, but we can also, in utilizing the public space surrounding this development, consider the sidewalk. We can have very durable mosaic, for example, installation. So there's lots of possibility. I don't see any constraints on a really nice public art installation here. I'll also, in summary, just suggest that we should acknowledge that staff's efforts, I believe, in taking the right approach in recognizing the challenges faced by our development community these days, and not least our smaller local developers. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm speaking in support of the motion. I think I was actually quite struck by the site complexity here, given that it's on the first pass is a relatively unencumbered lot in downtown. But when we throw in the interesting alignments, we'll say, and the need for the dedication for active transportation, I think I'm actually quite happy with the way these pieces have played out. We have the in relation to parking, we have the moto piece others have spoken to. I agree with those comments. I think it's important that we find ways to ensure that car share is a viable option in Squamish going forward, and more viable as we go. So I like that approach. I also recognize that the road land dedications are also an investment in active transportation in and of themselves. And that's benefits the broader community, as well as helps me sort of rationalize the parking piece. I think I was happy to hear in the conversation sort of that that description of balancing those employment space, parking, and housing, and that's the balance that we're trying both in policy and then in application of that policy. And I would agree that I think we've struck a good balance here. We know that we could lose maybe a housing unit or two to hit that 20% number. I don't think that serves our overall in the community. So I'm happy with that. And accept that there are trade-offs, and I think we've made some. What's been presented here is reasonable and very supportable. So that's why I'm supporting 3 readings here. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Greenlaw opposes. Councillor Pettingill, sorry, I just want to make sure I register your vote. Was that a vote in favor or against?
It was a week in favor this time. Still torn.
Okay. There's no percentage of in favors, but Councillor Pettingill was voted in favor of that. Thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
I would like to move that staff put the C4 review of C4 zoning back on the work plan for consideration. I'm not going to put a timeline to that, but I'd like it back on the list in case it's dropped off entirely.
That hasn't been seconded. Mr. Velez, would you like to reply to this sentiment?
Yes, thank you. Just for clarity, we didn't remove it from the work plan. It's just been delayed until we get through essentially 2025, which is where most of our commitments for Housing Accelerator Fund are.
So that once the Housing Accelerator Fund, the half work drops off, then you sort of go back to essentially where you were. So this motion would be not necessary at this time, is what you're saying? Okay. All right, we will just use that as an opportunity to move on to our next topic, which is District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011 amendment bylaw. This is for 1221 Pioneer Way, and is the business park alignment.
And there we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, Manager of Current Planning, and with me this evening is Jonas Villanushka, Senior Director of Community Development. Tonight I'll be introducing an amendment to the zoning bylaw for consideration of first 3 readings to rezone a parcel at 1221 Pioneer Way from R1 Residential to I-11 Business Park Industrial. (1221) Pioneer Way is a district-owned parcel in the north end of the Squamish Business Park. Staff proposed rezoning the site to align its zoning with its land use designation. The subject property is vacant and has no known development history. The subject parcel is flanked by townhouses to the north, undeveloped sites to the east and west, and light industrial and storage uses to the south. The map on the right of your slide speaks to the subject site's land use designation. It is designated mixed employment purple to the north and industrial business blue to the south. The site is zoned R1 Residential 1, which would allow up to 4 strata units and 1 accessory unit. The sites to the east, west, and south are also zoned I-11 and or I-8 specialized light industrial. The land to the north is zoned RM2 residential multifamily. Staff proposed rezoning the site to I-11 Business Park Industrial to reflect its land use designation. District and legislative processes were followed for this application. No consultation was initiated beyond mailouts and notification in the Squamish Chief per legislative requirements. No comments were received following notification. A public hearing is not required in alignment with provincial legislation and the district's bylaws. Council may elect to hold a public hearing at first reading. If the bylaw receives 3 readings, authorization by the Ministry of Transportation and Transit is required. Initial authorization has been obtained. Staff recommend first 3 readings of the subject bylaw number 3175, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Councillor Stone?
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm just curious, the land use designation on this site, as you mentioned, is actually split between industrial business and mixed employment. And so I'm just curious why we're pursuing an I-11 and not a split zone.
Thank you. Through the chair, the mixed employment land use designation typically speaks to a broader range of employment uses than industrial, but typically is would be appropriate here given its transition from residential to employment. Staff haven't done further analysis to determine what more complex employment and or employment residential zone should go here. That should be done through an application, for example. So at this time, we're looking to align it more generally with this land use designation, which would include industrial.
Okay, other questions on this? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation before us. If someone's ready to move that, which I will do actually, and Councillor French seconds. I'll speak to this briefly. I think I found the rationale for this quite compelling, and this seems like a reasonable course of action, and particularly given the starting point that we're in now, that's not a R1, is not an outcome that we want to see here in any way, shape, or form. So I do think, and this aligns with adjacent properties, so I'm happy to support and see this move forward. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, thanks. I too will be supporting the motion on the floor. I think that this is just like a little bit of tidying up. It makes good sense to put this parcel in line with its neighboring properties at I-11. So we'll be supporting the motion on the floor. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I won't be supporting the motion in practical terms because of the adjoining uses and so on. This does reflect, by my understanding, a likely increase in density. And because of the proximity to the pipeline and what is a massive first of its kind in Fortis's network pipeline, from my understanding, I don't yet have the understanding of risk to feel comfortable that zoning for more density here is appropriate, and still some work is being done to sort that out. But until I have that, I'm not willing to contemplate putting additional people at what seems to be a legitimate concern about risk. And so not at this time able to support this. I hope at some point in the future I could support some development here, but not right now. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Greenlaw, Pettingill opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. So next up, we have under staff reports, we have our UBCM 2025 minister meeting requests, and we have Jenny Franks to adoptions. I blew right through the adoptions. Sorry about that. I'm excited about the UBCM piece. Let's move through these adoptions quickly. So first is a District of Squamish Housing Agreement bylaw. This pertains to 38026 2nd Avenue. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next is a District of Squamish Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw, number 3155, 2025. I'll move that if there's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and now, sorry for the false start there. And now we're on to our Union of British Columbia Municipalities, or UBCM, 2025 Minister Meeting Request Discussion. Okay, I'll turn over to staff so they can introduce themselves on the topic.
Thank you, Chair. Just some technical difficulties. A moment.
Okay. Good evening, I'm Jenny Franks. I am the Legislative Assistant to Mayor and Council, and with me is Sarah Morris, the Manager of Legislative Services. We are here to talk about the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, for UBCM, which is coming up September 22nd to September 26th in Victoria, BC. This is where Squamish Council and staff can meet with the Premier and provincial cabinet ministers to advocate for Squamish-specific initiatives and issues. We are allowed one meeting per ministry, and over the last year, council and staff have identified 3 separate ministries that we would request meetings for. The meetings are 15 minutes. You can have 1 to 3 topics per meeting. And the application deadline for requesting the meetings is the evening of July 2nd, 2025. The staff recommendation is that council identify the topics to be discussed in priority order and specify which council members will attend each meeting. So the first one up was the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. And these are the topics for discussion.
Okay, have you broken each category down, just for the presentation? Have you broken each category down to a slide like this so we can sort of debate each ministry? Is that the, maybe we'll just kind of go through it and we can come back to each frame just so we understand the overall context?
Absolutely. The second one is the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship. And the third is the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for that. Councillor Stoner?
And sorry, just to clarify, we're only allowed to request to 3 ministries, or they'll only grant us 3 ministry meetings I thought that we could request more.
We can, but the subjects that were recommended fell into 3.
And then we can go up to 3 in each meeting as well. So that first one, I think, deserves some attention. So if you could take us back to that slide, transportation slide.
Yes.
So if we were to, I think it's clear that we need a meeting with this ministry. And I would look to my colleagues to help figure out on which 3 topics, or if there's a way to sort of group some of these into, you know, maybe the Alice Lake and Highway 99 and Malcolm Road and Highway 99 can go into a category of like intersection improvements. So we can talk about multiple examples of. But having been through this quite a few times now, I think that we'd likely all share that there's such limited time in these meetings that, you know, we really need to be selective here. So I think, I think there's lots here, and all of those things are of interest, but maybe we can move existing and future highway intersections as a category that captures a few of those points. And I do think that the Loggers Lane and Pemberton Bridge might be worthwhile discussions. I would argue that regional transit, the regional district has been heading up that initiative. I would expect a specific meeting on that to happen through that organization, and as has happened in the past to some success. So that's just sort of some first thoughts on this, but I'll go to council. I'd like to focus here because this right now, just to try to get it to 3 topics and who is attending. I've got Councillor Pettingill first, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Anderson.
Thanks. Just to clarify, my understanding as a starter is that these are the topics we think is important for council to speak to a minister about, but anything else on here is quite likely we would hope or want staff to have staff-to-staff discussions on, and so on. And so it's not just picking 3 and leaving the rest. Like, are we getting into the staff-to-staff meeting discussions? Is that part of this, or where should we focus?
We need to focus on our asks of the minister, and then the staff-to-staff pieces will flow on from there. So we'll just stay focused on this piece, but that other piece. But thank you for bringing that up, because just because we say it's not specifically a topic that we're going to advance in a minister meeting, should we get it, doesn't mean that work doesn't continue. Exactly, that work can continue at the staff level. Do you have comment on this now, or was it just that point of clarity that you had?
No comments yet, just that clarity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. My initial observations are that there are 2 separate divisions of the Ministry of Transportation and Transit that are reflected in this list, namely highways and regional services, intersections, and integrated transportation and infrastructure services, which are transit and a number of other things that I will refer to in a moment. The other observation I'll make about this list of intersections and Loggers Lane is that there's a couple of intersections missing that we should be mindful of, because when we go back again year after year, they make notes too. And we should be consistent. And we should be consistent that there are 2 other problematic intersections. One is Murren Park. And I've been receiving a number of complaints about the safety of Murren Park highway reentry lately, with the season coming upon us, people visiting, locals visiting there. And Site B, which goes back to the regional or the highway upgrade, which changed that intersection to the detriment of visibility and safety for everyone. So Site B intersection has a lot of policy behind it, including the OCP. And I think that if we're going to list these intersections, that they should both be involved. We should be comprehensive and consistent in our dealings with the ministry on intersections, and be comprehensive. So the other point I'd like to make is that 3 of these items are in fact relating to commercial transportation and truck routes and our port. And they are Site B, which is port access, Loggers Lane, which is a truck route, and the Pemberton Bridge, which has previously, with another bridge, the one-lane bridge on 3rd Avenue, been a part of a district collaboration with Squamish Terminals for a federal funding initiative in 2020 for the National Trade Corridor Fund. And I will elaborate as the chair sees fit, but it seems to me that it would be disadvantageous for us not to mention the truck route, port access aspects of Pemberton Bridge, Loggers Lane, and Site B. I would like to propose that we make choice between the two divisions of the ministry. It looks like we have to. But if we are going to choose integrated transportation and infrastructure services to meet with them, then we might take the opportunity to educate and remind the province about our local commercial transportation and trade enabling infrastructure geography, because we're left off the map and we are leaving money on the table year after year. We have North Vancouver getting bike lanes out of the Port Strategy Fund. We're getting Nanaimo with a new cruise terminal out of the Port Strategy Fund, and we don't make applications for it. We don't even think about it, and we're not on their map. I have a map produced by the province with me. Squamish isn't on it. So I'm suggesting that we choose between the different divisions, but that there may be merit in combining some of these infrastructure needs with a conversation with the ministry about our general trade enabling lands and port access, and that would include dredging and the rail yards. The rail yards being overseen by the Ministry of Transportation. We've been there since 2019, reminding of the rail yards, and so therefore we can continue to do so. There's a lot at stake. Millions of dollars are at stake for Squamish in working with the province and the federal government on local transportation infrastructure upgrades that relate to trade and our port. Mayor Herford, I probably had too many words there, but I hope I can boil it down to let's make a choice about which transportation division. But if we're going to involve integrated transportation infrastructure services, let's bring up the geography of our needs here relating to federal and provincial objectives in fostering trade.
Okay, so I think that it is important to recognize the, pieces of the same ministry. In the past, when we've advocated for something that was complex and involved different pieces of the same ministry or even multiple ministries, they've staffed those meetings with those people. So I don't think we need to do either or, but I think it's important to recognize there are two categories at play. I think I've sort of been breaking this down in my mind to highway intersection improvements or needs, present and future. Kind of captures a whole bunch of this, but we have some proof points. And really this is about, these meetings aren't about, although it'd be great if we could resolve these things in these meetings and stand up and shake hands with a deal. This is really about ensuring, really, to me, securing that next meeting, that next action point for our staff to be connected with the right staff at the ministry. So I think that the two categories would be that highway, I would suggest the highway intersection improvements or needs, present and future, and trade related pieces, which would be truck route, Pemberton Bridge. We could maybe list that out a bit further, which we don't need to go into that level of detail as to what we mean by that. I'd like to get a feeling of what we mean by that from council, but we don't need to go right into the creation of the briefing doc essentially for at this point, but we need to get there. So I think those cover off the biggest concerns. I was wondering about how we lean. In the past, we've had some success with asking tourism to put pressure somewhere else to achieve something, as an example. Or so I wonder if my one piece is I think we have a lot to talk to the Minister of Housing about, but some of them are here as far as what the limitations are into, and the friction points to the community as we're considering, increased housing, and a lot of it bleeds into these intersection pieces and things. I don't know that's necessarily the approach I want to take, but these are the types of approaches we can take. So on the sort of those two groups, Does that sort of generally address your concern? To be the highway piece, which can also include Site B intersection. You're right, that has been consistent over time, and then the trade pieces, which is kind of both those things in that case.
Yes, Mayor Herford, I think we can be concise and well prepared in delivering our concerns and information within the time allotted. I do have a question, though. A number of these intersections that are problematic for us have connections to provincial parks. Alice Lake, Shannon Falls, Squamish Chief, and Murren Park, each of these provincial parks. I wonder if there's merit in considering inviting a representative from BC Parks to any such meeting concerning these intersections.
Interesting. I don't know that the Alice Lake one, absolutely. The other ones that have been mentioned definitely have a park piece. I'm thinking about who has the power and the funds to affect these issues, and it's unlikely to be parks. But I'll ponder that and leave that to the group. So on this one, sorry, I've suggested a couple sort of categories we can put a lot of this into. I think that might be okay. I just wonder everyone else's comfort level, or if there's somewhere else we can ask for some of this, whether that's a different ministry or not. So any other thoughts on this? Oh, sorry, Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. A few thoughts. One, I think the regional transit piece is critically important, especially with the whatever the new term is for the CASA agreement with the Green Party and our local MLA and so on. But my assumption and hope would be that the regional district would take this on, and we would have sort of a strength in numbers. Unfortunately, the way the meetings go, we can't confirm that until it's too late, but I would sort of work on that assumption that the regional district would take that one forward. For me, I think a lot of the highway improvement ones, I know I've been in meetings where ministers have heard about this. These, to me, don't seem topics that jump out to a minister. They always seem to immediately get farmed out to staff, and I guess I have some feeling that this sort of topic about highway access, highway issues are something to definitely keep on being the squeaky wheel, but to do that through staff, where it seems to me there's more potential momentum, especially with the BC Transit Yard and so on, is on local transit funding model, maybe the active transportation infrastructure grant, but 10 and 11, that's where I see personally more opportunity with a minister. So for what it's worth.
Thank you. I think that I share your assessment with the regional district on regional transit, and I will say that at last year's UBCM, we had a meeting with the Premier and regional district representatives, mayors of the entire Sea to Sky, and as well as Squamish Nation. So I expect that that's in good hands, and we'll have that conversation at SLRD. So I do think we leave it there. I do think that it's sort of on the way out the door piece of hey, we'll be back to talk to you about regional transit with in that context sort of thing. So on this, so the local transit funding model and the active transportation infrastructure grant, I think, I think that's you make a good, some good points there. So I look to my council colleagues to see what we choose from this list and how we package it. We've heard a couple different selections. My recommendation had those not there, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. And some of the pieces that staff have been discussing sometimes need a nudge from the electeds to break it free. So any thoughts on this? We need to get through this slide and or do you want to come back to this? I'm just looking for other ways of addressing this. Does anyone? We've sort of got two different approaches. Councillor Pettingill, if we use my sort of highway intersection, present and future, that piece, and the trade pieces, which piece would you swap out for the transit and active transportation, or do you leave both of the, are you saying that your preference is we leave both of those aside and do just those local transit funding model and expansion of active transportation infrastructure grant as their two topics?
I guess my read of prior meetings is where, and not that I'm expecting to win the lottery on all of these, but chances of best success with a minister seem to be 10 and 11, and then maybe the trade piece, trade and ports, and then the staff to staff, I would put the highway intersection and related pieces. And again, this isn't speaking to importance or anything like that at this point. This is where I see where things have been resonated, where reminders are most helpful. It may be useful to have some electeds in those staff to staff meetings. It's just, I'm not sure that these things to me don't seem to get much at all benefit from having a minister there on the sort of highway intersection meetings. So yeah.
Yeah, I think my counterpoint to that would be, well, one is that staff to staff is staff to staff. There's no electeds in a staff to staff meeting. That's not an option. But the other piece is I think making some connections. The reason that the highway, that future access and the upgrades, I think there's an opportunity to sort of highlight the interconnectivity with the housing delivery and just the community sentiment around that and experience of being if not one of, if not the fastest growing communities without having those upgrades occur. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, and maybe it was something that wasn't supposed to happen that did, but from the regional district side, I have, as an elected with other electeds, been part of meetings where there's ministry staff, but not ministers or parliamentary secretaries. So I believe actually it is possible that electeds and municipal staff are meeting with just staff on the provincial side.
Okay, fair point. So council, thoughts on where we go here? Councillor Stoner, is that your hand?
Sure. I think my preference here would be similar to what Councillor Pettingill and Mayor Harford has said, is leave the regional transit piece to the regional district. I think that request is stronger with our partners through the corridor. The focus on trade enabling, what were we calling it? The loggers, I bucket the loggers lane and Pemberton Bridge components together, and port access components. And then I think the highway access and safety is one that we can bring back to the forefront. I think while I hear my council colleagues' requests on the local transit funding model and expansion of the active transportation infrastructure grant, those are elements that I think are well advocated for more broadly in resolution, as well as with other local governments, either through the Lower Mainland Local Government Association or at UBCM. And the reality is that the province has a really tight budget this year. And so not to say that advocating for these things is not important, but I don't think we will get very far on them. And I know that with the advances that we've made on the housing files, and the passing of the Garibaldi Estates Neighborhood Plan, for example, the highway access components keep on coming up time and time again. And so I think it's well worth spending a little bit of time with the minister talking about them.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would agree the transit funding for low internal and the active transportation infrastructure grant do fall into that category of more broadly applicable, where the other pieces are really about us advancing the Squamish specific pieces. Maybe that's a good way to sort of categorize this and make this list shorter. So, and maybe that's what I was doing internally when we got there, but that's, so that those comments are essentially around having that approach of highway intersections, present and future, and the sort of the trade related pieces, which include but not limited to the like truck route, Pemberton Bridge, and these types of issues there for this slide. So do we need to do a motion specifically for these? Okay, so let's say that we request a meeting for the Ministry of Transport for MOTT to to discuss highway intersections, current and future, as to cast a wide enough net to be able to talk about the issues here, and then sort of port and trade enabling access, such as the truck route related issues and including Pemberton Bridge. Councillor Anderson.
A list might include the one-lane bridge at Squamish terminals. Recently, some freight has been brought from destined for northern BC has been brought through Houston, Texas, because Squamish terminals can't handle it with that one-lane bridge. So, and then the rail yards. A capturing phrase might be trade enabling transportation infrastructure. And that would be a catchphrase where we could slot a number of these things into. Trade enabling transportation infrastructure.
Okay, that's the title of the second category. I'm moving that. Councillor Henderson, are you seconding that? Thank you. And then we can develop the content of the briefing from that description. I think I've spoken about this a fair bit. Is there any, so I'm not going to refrain from commenting. Go to Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, just my one hesitation with all these things and some of the other stuff that's going on the road is, you know, what are we trading? And I think I hope we stick to sort of our core sectors and sort of think about how we are talking about trade a little bit with some of the bigger picture goals that we are trying to address, and that it's not just sort of any trade necessarily.
Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to remind you that council also need to include in their motion which councillors will be attending the meeting.
Okay.
And just confirming that you can have up to 3 topics and you have 2 only included in this.
Okay. I've been doing my best to keep us to 2, with a third as a bailout if we weren't able to get there. So that's why I made a motion that had 2. I'd like to deal with the topics first as a separate motion, and then we can talk about who would like to attend, but I won't miss that piece. So any other comments on where we've landed here? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So let's go through. I'm going to suggest we go through the slides and get through this, and then we can go back through and make sure that we have a fair approach to who's attending which meeting and so on. If council's okay with that, we'll go to Councillor French.
Yeah, I'd like to throw a cog into that idea of just carrying on to the next. I'd suggest that we go 2 angles on these topics. So the MOTT minister is Minister Farnsworth, who I would categorize as cruising. He's pretty laid back. I wouldn't categorize him as a big doer. Now, Minister Bowen Ma, who has been tasked with infrastructure, is a doer who's got big budget. I'm going to suggest that we book a meeting, if possible, with Minister Ma to talk about the Pemberton Bridge, flood protection, and highway improvements, because her mandate letter includes wording that goes like, ensure faster delivery of cost-effective, high-quality generational investments in growing BC communities with aging infrastructure. And then a little farther down, it talks about identify and implement opportunities to reduce costs for taxpayers and expedite approval and construction of projects, including standardization of infrastructure like schools, hospital patient towers, childcare facilities, and drug treatment or mental health facilities, but not limited to these projects like major bridges, flood protection, and highway improvements.
I'm going to go, I've got Councillor Stoner. I think that it's still unclear as to what feeds into that and whether she's administering or deciding on those. And I think that's where I like the approach that we have, but I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner for comment on this.
Yeah, I appreciate the enthusiasm in trying to get to many ministers. It can often be productive. From what I understand, Minister Ma's portfolio does not extend to major road infrastructure at this time. It's explicitly around schools, healthcare facilities, and there's just sorting out what that looks like. So I don't think they'll be adding transportation to her file anytime soon, from what I understand.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
I will just add that we can overemphasize the role of the individual minister and the personality that might be in that portfolio. In past experience, all of our past experiences with these ministers' meetings, we have some very busy note takers among senior provincial government staff. And those are the people that keep notes year to year about us. And they're very high-powered, highly skilled people. So these should also be in focus for us. So we need not give too much attention, although sometimes the individual minister has been a frustration in the past, that's for sure.
Yeah, maybe if you could advance us a slide here, and we'll just try to tackle this next one. And then we need to, sorry, just so we're clear, we need to, I mean, this one's pretty clean. It might be easier to work through, but we need to work through these, choose our topics, and then we need to assign people for each meeting. Is there also a prioritization of these asks, or are they all just considered the same level of, or do we not need to worry ourselves with that?
Through the chair, you can prioritize your first choice, second choice, and third choice of topics for each meeting.
Oh, of topics. Oh, wow. Okay. I think they're in the reflecting in the last one, either order is fine, but we need to talk about both of those things. But we'll check in with council. So this one, I think here also we've, just a reminder, we put forward the motion around the diking standards and ensuring that we can make reasonable steps to protect the community from known flood risks, which I think is part and parcel of this. I think this is an important meeting for us. I'm reflecting back on a couple of years ago in the Upper Squamish, we had a forest fire. And one of the complicating factors in fighting it was the flood we had underway. So I would like to avoid that situation internal to the community. And I think this is an important piece for us. So I would like to see us request this meeting and advocate for this, and as well as the resolution we put forward that will be debated at UBCM. Regardless of the outcome of that, I think it's important that we discuss that concept here and tie that to our specific example. Even if it's not supported as a resolution, it could very well be picked up by the ministry and advanced outside of that. So I would suggest we request this meeting on those two pieces. So it's flood protection, funding model overall, and then the standards associated with that, which we can pull the language from that resolution to help support that. If everyone's clear on what we're asking, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
In the past, we have, in discussing the debris flow barrier in the Chikai Fan, discussed the obstacle of that type of barrier not being classified optimally for us. Is there any consideration in bringing up this topic of a debris flow barrier in the classification in what we're aiming at here and having a new look on the part of the province for flood protection? Would we consider bringing up a debris flow barrier as well?
I'm not ready to advance that inclusion here with what I know at this point, but I'd look to my council colleagues to see if that's something that we're stuck on. We also have a little bit of time, so if we need some clarification of like, should we be asking for that here, we can go to staff just to make sure that but these pieces also came through a staff lens. So if that was a crux for us, it would be on the list here. So I'm going to say that I feel comfortable not advancing that at this point for that reason. So I'll move that we pursue this meeting for flood protection, the funding model, and the issue of the flood protection standards, so like we had in our resolution for that's going to be debated at UBCM as well. Second by Councillor French. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pettingill, you have comment on this? Or
Yeah, sure. I mean, I broadly support this one. I would hope that, and I know we don't do it as part of our application, but we would invite Pemberton and maybe a couple other communities into the meeting if it seems that sometimes you're able to do that. And so I think there's maybe an opportunity for strength in numbers with this one. Just one other thought is in prior years, I believe the mayor has decided who would attend each meeting. And if that expedites things, I'd be comfortable with that process here. We might just express our interest in any particular ones, but leave it to you to decide who actually attends and might just get us through the evening more quickly. But just a thought.
yeah, thank you. And thank you for that vote of confidence. We'll keep moving through this and we'll have a little conversation about what's required for the application and then what that looks like practically as well, because sometimes there's a scheduling conflict that comes out with all the meetings that we end up having at this point as well. So I'm not so hung up on who ultimately ends up attending. I know that some of these things will work their way out practically, but we may need to have some of that discussion today just for the purpose of the request for the meeting. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to the next slide, please. So this one we may want to prioritize the pieces, and we may have other things to add. I would have loved to have a lengthy conversation with the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs, but Councillor Stoner, I saw your hand.
Yeah, a few suggestions on this one, and I appreciate these are elements that we've chatted about in the past. I think if I were to look at this and more broadly, they've smushed the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs together, which is frustrating. But there are a few elements that we have previously advocated on that I'd like to bring back around for consideration. So if I look at this list, the ones that I would suggest that we prioritize are the common law private covenants versus the zoning bylaw. I see that as continuing to be a challenge for us going forward potentially. The affordable housing piece, I would expand to include public land for housing and expediting short-term and or more deeply subsidized housing options or expansion of the Heart and Hearth program to support those that are hardest to house. That continues to be an important issue in our community that I think deserves conversation with the housing minister. And the other one I'd like to bring forward that we've advocated on many years in a row, but still I think requires us to beat the drum is on parental leave policies for locally elected officials. And so those would be my top 3 requests for Minister Kahlon.
Okay, thank you for that. What was the language was around, my note just had the hard to house. So there's just that category, that specific program, and you see that as then we don't discuss the access to public land for housing, or you think we can tie that all into one ask?
I think we can tie that all into one ask, how we use Crown lands for housing. And there can be 2 sub-bullets to that in my brain. And then, but it would mean taking the latecomer charges off. And I appreciate that that is something that Councillor Anderson in particular has championed in the past. I think waiting to see what the response is, and unfortunately we don't have the responses from the provincial government yet on our 2024 resolutions, but waiting to see on the responses there and seeing where our best leverage points within government would be my suggestion to move that forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Anderson. I do have Councillor Pettingill's hand.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Stoner regarding the latecomer charges. We're still awaiting the response from the resolution which came from the District of Squamish that was endorsed to EBC last year. It followed a resolution from another northern community on the same topic, and so perhaps there's some liaison we could undertake. I would also comment that it really does depend, our advocacy effort, on the involvement of our engineering department. They're the people that firsthand can tell us what the implications are for developers, for negotiations with developers on this issue. The other question I have is on the top item, simplifying access to public land for housing. In the district of Squamish, we have very little Crown land for housing because 190 hectares has been Crown granted to the Squamish Nation for housing. And that doesn't include the Chikai Fan, which was a woodlot license. So that there is almost no Crown land left. There's 2 parcels of Crown agency land, the old landfill and the BC Hydro substation, a little triangle up by the airport, but very little for housing. So my question is, I wonder whether the regional district might be interested to take this on, whether it may be more relevant for another community with that, facing that same issue, which we recognize. But the fact of the matter is, we don't really represent that issue, if you like, in the provincial context, because there's just very little Crown land left here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I do appreciate that component. I think it also relates to district-owned lands with Crown land reverters on title, which can frustrate our process of moving projects forward on lands that have previously been dedicated to the district from the province. And so there's kind of 2 elements there, recognizing that there aren't that many Crown land parcels per se, but some of the process within the provincial government frustrates our ability on district. They're not quite district owned, but
Sponsored Crown
sponsored
grant, that sort of thing.
Sort of lands.
Yeah. I think that it's enough of not an aside, but I have a hard time seeing tying this to the hard to house. Like I get why, but I think we might be pushing the limits of our definition of number of items if we have bullet points under. Like I get that. So but I do think that the latecomer charges can be set aside given that there's a process underway. And I think that adding the maybe we step away from the access to public land for housing piece and focus on the hard to house. So covenant's hard to house. And I agree with you on the municipal affairs side. The parental leave piece, I think, is I can't believe we're sitting here in 2025 talking about this, honestly. So it deserves attention, and I'd be happy to put that there as sort of our 3. But I'll go around the room. Councillor Pettingill, you're next, and sorry if that derailed where you're going, but
Yeah, well, just a couple thoughts. One, yeah, something like Brennan Park, for example, that might be a place where there could, in theory, be housing if we had some provincial support and get the rink and a pool and some nice housing above and so on. So in that topic of public land for housing, for me, there are potential opportunities there if we can remove some roadblocks and get support. Some of the things like parental leave and so on, I wonder if Minister Anderson might be a more appropriate avenue for that one. So maybe we're piling too much into this ministry. I also wonder heart and health and some of topics around related topics around encampments and so on. If we should consider Minister of Social Development, Poverty Reduction, or Minister of Public Safety, if some of those topics might be better served in those ministries rather than trying to pile it all under housing and uni affairs.
I think the interplay in jurisdiction with the hard to house topics, I think, to me, this is a good place for those. I understand those other recommendations. So maybe we leave are you suggesting the parental leave can go somewhere else? I feel municipal affairs is that. I'd actually like to see this minister doing municipal affairs work, which is what, not just the housing file or using municipal affairs just to achieve housing outcomes. Like I think there's a standalone piece here, but
just Minister Anderson is Minister for State for Local Governments and Rural Communities, and my understanding is that this might be part of her portfolio potentially.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner. I think she has some perspective on this.
Yeah, outside of this room, there's a fair bit of advocacy that is going on this file, and my general temperature check is that Minister Kalon's the one that still needs the biggest push around the table. But there are a number of folks who are allies in this conversation, Minister Anderson being one of them, Minister Bear being another, but it requires the Minister of Municipal Affairs to continue doing the work.
Okay. So our list at this point is for this one, for this ministry, is the covenants issue, challenges around the hardest to house, and then the parental leave. Maybe in that order, even. So I'll move that's we pursue a meeting here on those three topics in that order. Second by Councillor Stoner. Councillor Pettingill, sorry, comments on this or?
Well, I guess if we supported this, is there still room to pursue the hard to house with an additional ministry? I just, notwithstanding some of the housing first ideas, there are really critical wraparound service issues, and housing alone is far from a solution. And so I think we're leaving a lot of sort of issues unaddressed if we address this only in Ministry of Housing and Community Affairs.
Yeah, I agree with you, and thank you for bringing that up. I do think that we can focus the conversation here on the housing portion of this, and then the wraparound services is maybe a way that we can make sure we're not asking for a meeting with a different ministry on the same topic. You know, they're obviously connected, but so I'm going to call the question on this piece, and we'll try to find a creative way to push this further on another front with another ministry. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next slide, if we can. And thank you for structuring it this way. These are hard conversations, so without that was it. Okay, so now we were left with sort of that state of like, and what else? We do have the recommendation. Actually, do you mind just pulling down the presentation if we don't need it anymore? It'll help me see Councillor Pettingill's hand. So now we're left with what haven't we addressed, and I do think that I'd like to start with where we just left off. So, Councillor Pettingill, seeing as this is your, thank you for the recognizing that we needed that it would be appropriate to bring this up with an additional ministry. Do you have? Would you like to? Sorry, what was the ministry? The label again? Sorry, my brain's starting to melt in this long day.
There's two that jump to mind: Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, or Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. Seem appropriate for issues around encampments, wraparound services, some of these topics.
If I was to break that into two pieces, the poverty reduction piece, I think is about, to me, is the most appropriate for the wraparound services piece. And I see the public safety piece around, you know, seeing a reasonable level of service and ability to enforce, so more like on the enforcement side. So I would suggest that we focus on the poverty reduction piece. And as some of those other enforcement pieces are actually before the courts, it might be harder to sort of flush out for those reasons.
Yeah,
what do you think of that approach? Or we could maybe ask for a combined ministry. They might spend a lot of time working together, I would imagine.
The additional piece that's in my mind is we've talked about if the OPS was available 24/7, would that sort of help keep people out of trouble, under supervision, and so on, with more supports and VCH services under one roof. Not sure we want a Ministry of Health, but if we can draw some of these connections of like to the.
Okay, hold on. I've got some hands in the room, so I'll just gonna go around there. So if we can, Councillor Stoner.
Appreciate where you're trying to go with this, Councillor Pettingill. I think Ministry of Health is probably our best bet. Given the breakdown of portfolios, it is obviously a cross-jurisdictional issue, but I think Minister Osborne takes the biggest component around mental health, substance use, treatment, and recovery. And the VCH components around the OPS would all fall under Ministry of Health, given it's VCH operated.
Okay, so then I was going to try to turn this into a motion. I thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. I think requesting a meeting with Minister Osborne, Minister of Health, to discuss wraparound services for our vulnerable population would be appropriate. We could break that into more pieces if we want to have 3 topics, but I think that's the topic and it has many bullet points underneath. So I'll move that if Councillor Stoner seconds. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Anything else we missed? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. In 2019, we made a request of the then Minister of Economic Development, if you like, who at the time was Bruce Ralston, for the establishment of a regional economic trust. The Squamish is not represented in the map of provincial economic trusts. There's the Island Coastal, which includes Gibson's, but not us. We've got the Northern Development Initiative Trust, which includes areas A, B, and C in the SLRD, and Lillooet, but not Pemberton, Whistler, or Squamish. And then we had the Columbia Basin Trust. So we are not represented on the map of these trusts. And this means that we are missing out on opportunities for funding envelopes or for project funding. And this has been periodically since 2019 been discussed by our economic leadership team and economic partners forum, which includes as a member of provincial government representatives who is very enthusiastic about this and very supportive. I forget the lady's name. As an example of what it could be used for, we have in our current financial plan not found room for the Chamber of Commerce grant writing workshop program, which we funded in the past, but we just didn't have the dollars for this time. In looking into what these regional trusts fund, they fund grant writing workshop programs for local chambers of commerce. In fact, it's a perennial project that they look after, each of these other funds. They also look after things like economic development lands modeling. Our Squamish Insight model could use some help. We could apply for such for project funding that way. Economic strategy studies of various kinds, including marine strategy elements. For example, Nanaimo's new cruise ship terminal was the outcome of an initiative between the Islands Coastal Trust and the Federal National Trade Corridor Fund. Kitimat had a study done on funded by their trust on how they could compete with Squamish. So that we're missing out. We're not represented on the map, and we've been there before. I don't think we were badly received, but perhaps it takes some persistent asking for Squamish to be, this anomaly to be addressed. And this would be a request for the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development, and Innovation, establishing a regional economic trust. There are 2 routes for the government. They can include us in Island Coastal, or they can create a sea to sky region. One issue there is that we've got Whistler in the middle, who already has a very generous resort municipality fund that we don't have either. So that's the suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. That was, thank you for that information. I agree we should pursue this. Your delivery, although wonderful, wasn't quite concise enough for a motion. So I'm going to look for I think I saw a hand over here. I don't know if that was a question or if you can turn that into a motion for us.
Both. Pemberton will be very disappointed if we get included in coastal and they get left out, because I think they're the only other community that is not captured by an economic development trust. So my motion would be that we move to request a meeting from JEDI on inclusion in the regional economic development trusts, as well as a topic on economic development lands and opportunities in Squamish.
Thank you. I will second that. And we will get that. So, yeah, thank you for raising this. And I think this also gives us opportunity to push on that. The second half of that motion is actually sort of a secondary way to push on things we captured earlier. And so happy to support this. Councillor Pettingill on this.
Yeah, I generally support what's being suggested so far, but I had an additional sort of pair, maybe you could lump them into one topic that I had envisioned for JEDI. For me, it's something that's evolved since our LMLGA resolutions went in, but I guess my perception, without trying to get too sort of broader political, is that in an attempt to deal with Trump and Trump tariffs, we seem to be racing to accomplish the things that Trump is trying to accomplish in terms of pursuing fossil fuels and sort of, I would say, policies of exclusion and so things like, again, I see governments backing away from some of their climate commitments, also backing away from DRIPA and UNDRIP. And I think generally applicable where there is local relevance in particular is Squamish Nation's strong and vocal opinion to Bill 15. And as we work on an MOU with Squamish Nation, I think it's an opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder. And so my thought would be and maybe it's just a couple brief talking points when we talk about these other things in the meeting of like, let's remember what makes us special, what makes us different, and sort of the values we hold as we pursue economic development and so on. Let's not race the neighbors to the south to the bottom. Let's focus on what makes us unique and special. And I think, we have been a leader in some of these areas. And so even though it's just words, I think it is important words to come from us. And I think, again, because of some of our work with the nation and our goals with an MOU and so on, there's some particular relevance there to me.
So just to orient us, we do have a motion on the floor, so we could pose an amendment that we could vote on. I also think that perhaps that specific discussion, and I agree with you. I don't know if this is a place that could happen, but also Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation would make sense as a ministry to advance this with. I'd like to hear from my colleagues on that, and we can also test a motion if we do want to include it in this particular ask, which I don't know exactly how I feel about including it here. If that's the best place to do that, I might want to do some research to make sure that we're pushing on the piece that needs a push on this particular subject. But I understand the concerns there, Councillor Pettingill. Anyone have some thoughts on this, given that we have a motion on the floor? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. It might be of some comfort relating to the concerns raised by Councillor Pettingill to refer to the Sea to Sky Development Trust briefing note prepared for Minister Ralston in 2019. The language and philosophy reflected in this briefing note is heavily towards green economy and reconciliation, and the green economy sectors identified in our our economic strategy plan. So I think that we can take inspiration in making a new pitch from this brief from 2019. I think some of the language would address some of the notions that and concerns that are raised by Councillor Pettingill.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I would be supportive if that's the way we could work it in. I had thought about the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, but my sense is they already get it, and it's more some of the economic development ministries that need to hear the message, which is why I was thinking of JEDI or someone for this message. But if we can align it with, as Councillor Anderson said, some of our other messaging, that would make sense to me.
Yeah, I see the next steps from this work is preparing the briefing notes, and I would imagine, and I don't think it's a leap at all to assume that we're going to build off the previous direction and layer on. So perhaps that can form part of the narrative of delivering our message. So if you're okay with that approach, or if unless you have an amendment to propose, I'll move ahead and call the question. So seeing no hands there, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. And then we'll work to develop the briefing notes and so on going forward from here as a next step. So now we have.
Sorry, Mayor, there's one last piece.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I missed it in the housing, and that was already kind of full. I just want to flag it, and maybe it just doesn't make the cut. But I think there is the discussion and the rumblings I seem to hear from the province about restricting our ability to recover some of the costs of growth without providing alternate taxation mechanisms. And so I am concerned about us, the pressure to meet the housing targets without being able to fund all the related infrastructure, restrictions on DCCs or what have you. I feel like it might be an important topic to raise, or in our existing discussions, we've agreed on like a sentence or two just to underscore that might be acceptable, but that's a piece that has me quite concerned.
Yeah, I share your concern. I'm just thinking about the timing, whether it's to have a specific piece of legislation to push back on or to comment on. Does anyone have any insight into this particular piece at this time, including staff? Have we heard anything from the ministry pushing us on this stuff to date? Not yet. Or no, maybe never, but not yet.
It's a good point. I haven't heard anything official about this. We know that the development community has been advocating for changes to not only put limitations on things like DCCs, but also for the province to fund infrastructure projects, because they realize that infrastructure is needed at the end of the day for developments to continue, for housing supply to continue.
And I've heard similar conversations at the federal level as well, trying to figure out what the role that can play in all of this. So I think that might be premature to push back against the overall concept until it sort of matures a bit. But maybe by the time we get there, that's an issue we can highlight it in that meeting. The time frame of this process is a bit maddening, I will have to say out loud. If we're here in June and what's the most important things to us in September, but let's see where that goes. I don't think we have it's far enough along to have a specific ask on that yet, is my assessment, Councillor Pettingill. But okay, so the meetings that we have are MOTT, the housing and municipal affairs. There was the diking piece as well, and then we have the hard to house challenges with poverty. Or no, we landed on Minister of Housing there, Minister Osborne, for that. So in the past, I recall we've all signed up for these, and then when we got down to the actual what was accepted, we sort of readjusted to make sure that everybody had opportunity to be in the meeting. We may not get all the meetings, so I'm happy to fill if council is okay with it. I would suggest I can put some placeholders into this. We don't need to have a discussion about it, and then when they're received, we can go through and have a discussion together as to who actually attends once they're approved. Would be my approach. So I'll just, if it's okay, I'll make a motion that I work with staff to assign those meetings for the purpose of the application, and then we'll circle back once we have clarity as to what meetings are accepted and when they're scheduled. Are you seconding that? Okay, I've spoken to it. We've done essentially a similar approach in the past, and I can work with council once we have this sort of know what we're getting and when we're getting it, and we can start looking at individual schedules to make sure that these opportunities are spread around, and also that we have the folks that have either subject matter expert or particular interest in a topic in the appropriate meeting. But I'm happy to work with council on that going forward. Any other comments here? Councillor French?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. I think that approach works just fine for me, and something to potentially keep in mind as we get to the point of assigning who's going to be in what meeting. I have personal connections with Randine Neal and Minister Farnworth, and I think we should take that into account. Anybody that has got previous connections with any of these ministers, I think we should get those people into those rooms because the familiarity is really helpful in these conversations.
Yes, thank you. That'll be part of the discussion for sure. And also, we heard earlier from MLA Valeriat that his willingness to attend or not, depending. So we can have those discussions once we have this confirmed, which we're getting. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I unfortunately won't be able to attend the UBCM this year due to other commitments. So take me off the list of minister meetings. So apologies for that.
No, that's okay. We all have upper limits of our capacities that we hit sometimes. That's totally fine. Thank you for that. So next, we didn't have any late agenda items. So we'll move on through the agenda now. We didn't have any correspondence action requested. We did have an item referred from the consent agenda. This was the Community Climate Action Plan update, I believe. And Councillor Pettingill, I believe that was you. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate all the staff updates. I know we had a lot of discussion on this, and so glad to see that we arrived at something that we were able to agree on. I hope that this will serve us well in advocacy. There's one thing, and maybe I missed it with some of my other focus going through, and I'm not going to propose an amendment at this time, and it's a small thing, but I just wanted to call it out because it's something that I hear in language and where we just sort of accept and repeat things. But there's a line about on page 43 of our agenda about natural gas being a fossil fuel but relatively cheap. And I vaguely recall we might have even had some discussion about this. And I think the reality is, and the clarity I wish we would have in the future is that while your invoice from the utility might make it seem cheap, when you look at the health impacts and all the, the lost opportunity and the forest fires and on and on and on, the subsidies, it's not a cheap fuel. And that's part of the, why we're doing a lot of the work that we are trying to do. And so I think when we just sort of say, oh, it's cheap, people sort of accept that and move on, but it builds I think a misunderstanding. And so I just wanted to highlight that and call that out, and sort of a reminder for all of us to be very cautious in our language. It's easy to forget sometimes, but I think it's important as well. But with that, again, very happy to see this update and all the work therein, and the way that staff addressed all the requests we made. And so thanks, staff, for that. With that, I would move receipt.
Thank you. I'll second that. Any other comments on this? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
I just wanted to reiterate some of the comments that Councillor Pettingill was making. There's a lot of misinformation out there about the fossil fuel industry and LNG in particular, and the science is clear that it does have a higher carbon footprint than coal, and that means by definition it is not a cheap fuel. So I think it is important to keep that narrative clear and continue reiterating that there are substantial costs to that industry and that they are being heavily subsidized by our government. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments here? I'll just say that this piece of work I'm particularly excited about, and I look forward to sort of taking those steps that are there, and I think we're well. It positions us well to move forward in a way on the climate file that doesn't leave anyone behind, which was a key aspect of this revision, and I'm quite happy with the outcome. So yeah, looking forward to next steps here and being able to have, when asked about climate, and for those people feeling climate anxiety, as many are, having a document like this to point towards, to highlight the specific actions that this municipality is taking is incredibly helpful. So that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for that. So we didn't have any business arising from the minutes, any notice of motion, open question period. If anyone in the audience has a question of clarification related to agenda items, this would be an opportunity to pose it. We've no takers at this point. Councillor staff announcements. Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. On Friday, June the 13th, the grad ceremony took place at Brennan Park. I attended on behalf of council and the District of Squamish. Trustee April Lowe shared inspiring words that focused on kindness and respect. And I was really impressed that she gave every single graduate a gift. Taped under their chairs was a Canada flag, because there was a heavy patriotic message in her speech, and a small piece of granite. She suggested that the graduates could keep that small piece of granite with them on their travels throughout their life, whether they stay here or move out into the world. And I want to note that a number of graduates in this class have parents who work for the District of Squamish. There are a lot of DOS employees in that auditorium that night, watching with pride as their children went across the stage. You know what? To call them children just doesn't seem appropriate. Well, they're young adults, walked across the stage to get their diplomas. So it was a great celebration, and I will send out congratulations this evening to all the graduating class of 2025.
Thank you for that. Any other announcements? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
I attended a couple of events recently that were connected to Squamish Climate Action Network. And it's hard to believe that that organization was started about 16 years ago already, with a series of film nights at the Adventure Center. And one of the first initiatives took place after a visit to the municipal landfill, where Squamish Can spearhead spark plug Anna Santos was so disgusted with what was being thrown out by the community of Squamish and ending up at the landfill that she decided to lobby to have the free dump day eliminated and replaced with a reuse it fair. The first Reuse It Fair was held in the parking lot across from the Adventure Center a couple of years later, with the helpful support of the District of Squamish Engineering Department. And since then, the Reuse It Fair has grown. And this past Saturday, June 7th, was really so happy to see the growth in that event. The volume of materials not only brought, but brought away, and people getting used to how to use that Reuse It Fair. And it's really a part of our community, and Anna Santos would be so proud. The other event was on this past Friday was the Garden and Farm Open House next to Squamish Elementary School. And when I was with Squamish Can and some of my compatriots, we were also jealous of the fun that the gardening and food group of Squamish Can had. Always had fun, but more than anyone else. And I do not know what they do with all of that garlic that they're growing, because I'm not a garlic person, but they grow scads of it. And there's all kinds of community connections involved in dealing with that garlic, I'm sure. But anyway, I was most impressed to come across very keen and knowledgeable senior Howsound Secondary School students who were the tour guides for that event this past Friday. So well done, Squamish Can, after 16, maybe it's 17 years already, that it's still going strong and building. Thank you.
Okay, I learn something every time. Sometimes it's about events, and sometimes it's about folks' dietary preferences. Not a garlic fan, noted. Any other updates that anyone would like to share? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
It's not exactly an update. I just wanted to thank all of our first responders and all the firefighters and everybody who helped out, all of our staff and everybody who helped out during the forest fire. It was to my knowledge, it was our third forest fire within the district boundaries so far this year. And a really stark wake up, I think, to a lot of people. Anyways, I just hope that everybody stays safe out there. I hope that people are really conscious of how dry our forests are, really being fire smart, really being fire aware out there. And again, a really big thanks to all the people who volunteered, all the people who weren't volunteering but were still working there, all the people who donated, all the people who helped. Thank you so much for helping our community.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else have anything for this part? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. A couple things, and I'm really sad I missed the grad event. I was actually working that evening, and it's maybe partly why working too much I've fighting this cold, but still had some good fun. I did manage to make it out to Old Town New Queens at the Britannia Mining Museum as part of the month of Pride celebrations, and it was my first time. I'd heard about it, but had never actually made it there before. Such a fun, joyful event. Not quite what I expected, but just a really great community event. And there's been a few Pride-related events I've had an opportunity to attend. And I guess what struck me is I think we do lots of things that feel like they're important and they make sense and align with our values. But some of the Pride events and the attention we're given, I'm looking at the flag behind Mayor Herford right now. It is really meaningful to a lot of people in our community who I think have felt scared in the past and feel sort of worried right now. And so seeing the positive impact of these events and the great community support from most of our whole community, basically, it's really sort of touching, and so sort of proud and happy to be part of that. I will say that we had our first Amped in the Park training, and of course I have to talk about Amped in the Park on Thursday, another one this coming Thursday, and then as of the 26th, we'll be in full swing. I just want to note that this year I have seen such a growth in the range of volunteers in terms of genders and ages. It was a very sort of monotone sort of volunteer in previous years, and this year we're really expanding. So it's really exciting, and I'm expecting a great season. And then last but not least, I would also like to add my thanks to everyone responding to the wildfire, in particular calling out the work of Mayor Herford to keep the community informed and feeling sort of as calm and knowledgeable as we can be, but also internally to acting Mayor Stoner, and knowing and feeling as a councillor that we're being kept up to date, and that we're in good hands, and sort of you're watching all the messages, but not feeling like you have to jump in, because we know that we're following the plans and the processes that we've agreed to, and that it's running smoothly, and that those communications are flowing, and we have all the information we need to feel secure, and that everyone is doing the best they can. So just thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a fairly sizable update here, but I'll try to move through it quickly. So since we last met, we had our final youth council meeting of the year, and it was great. This cohort of youth council was each group has been different, and this group was not only ambitious but had the follow through to realize their ambitions, and I really enjoyed the work with them, and many of them graduated as we heard about the grad ceremonies. So I really enjoy that that meeting monthly. It's a monthly meeting, youth council, and yeah, I'm always left knowing that we're going to be okay, because we are all truly placeholders for when these folks step further into their leadership, and I would like to think eventually arrive in these seats. So that was great. On Friday, sorry, I got my calendar in front of me here. I was lucky enough to, that was Wednesday the 4th. On Thursday, I attended a session put on by the Climate Caucus that was entitled Wildfire Emergency Planning: Lessons from Yellowknife. And I think this was sort of the last piece of external knowledge building, I guess, before little did I know that we were about to experience our own emergency. Some of you were in attendance at LMLGA, where we were lucky enough to hear from former Fire Chief Wes Kelowna, and the Mayor of Lytton, as well as our own Kirby from the Sea to Sky Gondola, talking about leadership in crisis. At the FCM meeting, I was able to connect and heard the Mayor of Jasper speak a few times and had some one-on-one time as well. And I'm thankful for the generosity of all these leaders that have been able to share, not just with me, but broadly the lessons that they've learned. And some of those learnings were put into place during response, and others will find their way through in due course. So little did I know that was a bit of foreshadowing of what the next week was to hold. But on Saturday night, the 7th, I attended the 67th annual BC Mine Rescue and First Aid Competition Banquet and Awards. So this is the second year that they've held this event at the Britannia Mine, but the majority of the competitors stayed in Squamish, and this awards banquet was at the Railway Museum. So and there I was able to I had met some people from all over, including the minister of hold on, I get it's Minister of Mining, but it's Ministry of Mining and Critical Minerals. Minister Barr was there, and was able to have a good conversation with him. But it was great to also see the award ceremony itself had just all these different groups of people that are working hard to keep everyone safe while they're in operations and mines around the province, and just cheering each other on in a friendly competition of just being the best at saving people's lives is was something quite great to see. And there was maybe 200 plus people there. It was a substantial event for the community that flew under a lot of people's radars, I'm sure. Then on Monday, of course, I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting the annual Mayor's Luncheon, and thank you to my colleagues for that were able to attend that. I think and then that led right into transition from that essentially directly to wildfire response. So I think that probably have lots to say on this. I'm going to be as brief as I can. The response from across the board was incredible. And part of that response was thank you to council for the trust and space to do the work that needed doing in response. And thank you to Acting Mayor Stoner for being that liaison between myself and the rest of council, sort of that piece of trying not to have, not that your reports, but just to make sure that I don't have too many direct reports during that. I would not have been able to meet that expectation without that help. And so that was critical for me and for the response overall. I have to say I received support from our MLA reached out, our MP reached out, and yesterday rose in the House of Commons to speak on the response and to give kudos to everyone involved in the response. So that has been shared around, but I haven't yet to watch it, but I've told that it happened. And so that was great. We also had Minister Green reach out. And in preparation for that call, I reached out to the team. Hey, if you had the Minister of Emergency Response on the phone, what would you ask for? And the response back was like, kudos, we're getting everything we need and everyone's working well together, which is one, what we should expect of our systems, but also worth celebrating because that's rarely the case in a complex response to an emergency. I also had elected officials, not just from up and down the sea to sky, but from across the province and country reach out, offering their support, advice on various matters as well. So it was great to see that, and I'm just really appreciative of the time that our EOC staff put in. I think that as much as I was delivering the information, the collection of that information, not just the quantity, but the quality of that information, both in my briefings that I was delivering to the media over the last week, as well as the social posts and the other channels, was really remarkable and led to, I've stood in front of cameras before relaying briefings that resulted in lots and lots of questions, and going as we advanced, there were less and less questions because the answers were out there. And if they weren't out there while we're delivering them, we came back and had them addressed at the next opportunity or at some space in between. I found the YouTube video of the flyover particularly useful for context. If folks didn't know the lay of the land, or if you haven't watched that yet, I'd go have a look. The footprint of the fire hasn't changed since that flyover, so it's still relevant. So lots and lots to say there. We will do, there will be some learnings, and we'll do a proper debrief on that. Through that, I was also trying to keep the regular business moving, such as getting ready for this meeting and a few other meetings along the way. So one of those was, that's what I'll say about the fire response for now. But as well as I was able to attend the men's shed. They are having a planning meeting, and as community was responding, I thought it was really interesting to engage with a group that really is about building community in and of itself, but also they take on so many projects from external not-for-profits, and I really think they are all about that, about building community. And so that was great to spend some time with them. Also on Saturday, I was able to attend an event that was really sort of a pre-event for the Mosaic Mountain Heritage Festival. The Heritage Festival is coming up July 19th, and that was put on by IHCCS, Humanity in Unity is the slogan there. And I thought, again, this was a timely piece of folks working to bring people together. And then yesterday, I was able to spend some time with the Miss Prescott's class of grade 2-3 kids at Garibaldi Highlands Elementary. One of the Mayor for the Day's applicants, one of the Mayor for the Day winners came from this class, and I found all their projects so compelling. I had such a hard time choosing that I made the offer to go and speak to them. So it was great to talk to them. And obviously, one of the things that I learned here was that, one, I knew this was a French class, which I do not speak French. And what little French I have is below the grade 2-3 level, just for future reference. But they were full of curiosity, obviously a lot of fire discussion, but also about the other things that we do. So that was, I'm glad I had that opportunity and to do that. They also passed me a manila envelope full of thank you cards for our first responders, which I will deliver in person tomorrow night for the Squamish Fire Rescue recruit graduation ceremony. So I've said previously to my council colleagues, if you have the capacity to, I can't think of a more opportune time to attend the annual graduation of our new recruits to our fire service. And I will leave my update there. That was a short version, I swear. If there's no other updates, I will look for, yes, Councillor Stoner, can I help you?
I'd like to move a motion to terminate.
I'll second that motion. Thank you for that. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you so much, everybody.